Hello and welcome to the penultimate show of the GhostÉire Channel Season 5. My name is Anthony Kerrigan, and tonight we are joined by historian, author, writer, and researcher Paul Weatherhead. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Anthony.
It's great. It's great to have you on the show there, and great to have those that are watching there. Great topics tonight. We've got Weird Calderdale. Also, halfway through the show, we're going to be talking about Alan Godfrey's alien encounter. And the last part of the show, we are going to be talking about phantasms of Christmas past. Paul Weatherhead's Paul's very own new book, which is available to purchase now. I think it is there. We'll go
That's
into
right.
that a bit more. A few shout outs. Paul, Jonathan says hi from Fermanagh. Hope all is okay with this wind. I hope you're okay there. We had to cancel last night. We thought it might be best to do so. There might be still a bit of trouble tonight as well. I think there's been a lot of internet problems, especially where I am as well. So bear with me there. If you see me pixelated and all that, it's just hopefully you can still hear me there. It's not me just imploding. Anyway, so yes, so if you have any questions for Paul, feel free to put them on this live feed. You can also go to our website, www.ghostera.net, go to the contact page, fill in the blanks. If you have a personal message, just put in brackets private message. We are coming live through Facebook, but also through our website, www.ghostera.net. On the homepage there, you'll see the red button, the GhostÉire Channel. Just click on that, and it'll bring you to the live broadcast. You'll be able to see past shows and see what's coming up in the future from there. If you're affiliated with any paranormal team or tourist attraction, feel free to name the group and the organisation. I will also give a shout out to you. There's also a competition where you have a chance to win up to €40, folks, and put your name into the Halloween mega draw. It's your last chance to do so. To do so, you have to comment on this live feed tonight. Paul, great to have you there, sir.
My pleasure, and thanks for inviting me.
And so we're gonna start off with the first topic there, which is going to be Weird Calderdale. Can you tell us what does Calderdale look like, and where is it?
Yeah, well, Calderdale is part of West Yorkshire, so if you think of the UK, Calderdale is right smack bang in the middle. It's sort of it's got the Pennine Hill Range, mountain range running up the middle of it, sort of halfway between the cities of Leeds and Manchester. So biggest town is Halifax. That's about 100,000 population, but around Halifax, you've got this very narrow valley, the Calder Valley, where you've got towns like Hebden Bridge, Todmorden, and then surrounding those, you've got wild moors, windy moors, Bronte country.
Okay, I don't know. I think we seem to have lost Paul there for 1 second there. Um, yeah, if you're there, Paul, just click on the link again, or I'll bring you back in. So yes, we're just talking about Calderdale. It is as well, I suppose, on Paul's side there. It is kind of blustery as well. The weather still as well from Storm Amy there. So if you Yeah, so we're going to be talking about we're Calderdale. So if you are around on Friday the 24th of October, we are going to be doing the Halloween extravaganza 5, and that's on the Friday the 24th of October. Are you doing, Paul? Can you see and hear me?
And can you see me?
Um, I probably
Or can you
cannot
hear
there,
me?
but I can hear you there. Might take a while there. We can carry on, I suppose, there if you want there, or yeah, we carry on for a little bit if you want to there. So yeah, more about Calderdale and what is it, what's it like?
Yeah. So, as I said, I mean, you can. I think there may be an image on your screen now of a famous landmark, Studley Pike, sort of high on the
Hmm.
moors over Calderdale. So you can see it's former industrial towns like Halifax, then surrounded by textile towns, and then around those, you've got these sort of desolate moors, and it sort of borders with Lancashire. So you've got high hills, wooded valleys, um, industry, agriculture, and then of course you've got all these sort of weird and wonderful um, Fortean phenomena that I describe in Weird Calderdale.
Okay. What is, yeah, so is there any famous people that are associated with the area? Is there poets? I understand there is, or people involved in an industrial revolution?
Um, yes, well, of course, probably the most famous poet would be Ted Hughes, who was born in Mythenroyd, which is just down the road from here. And then over the moor, about 10 miles, you've got the Bronte sisters. So you've got Bronte country, Heathcliff and Cathy and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, yeah. I just got to do one thing there. Go just refresh the page there 1 second there because I think there's trouble with the issues with the. Okay, I think Paul's going to go now. So I'm just going to refresh the page there, folks. 1 second. Um, Maybe I'll just wait for Paul to come back on again, and then I can refresh the page. Um, Sorry now, folks. There's a lot of technical issues there, and yeah, thanks for letting us know there, Jonathan. If you can hear me, but I can't see me, unfortunately. There, we're just going back in again, and okay, okay. We'll just see. I might just have to. You just stay on there, Paul, and I'm just going to refresh the page there. One
Right.
second. Okay. Okay. There. Okay. So yeah, I think we still. If anybody can still see us or hear us, let us know. I'm sorry about this. It's a lot of interference, which is very well, probably the weather as well. Um, so, Paul, yeah, you can hear me, can you, Paul?
I don't know if you can hear me or see me.
Yeah, I can hear you there, Paul. Can you see me?
I can.
Okay. If you could just explain that more about what made you decide to write a book about the area.
Well, growing up in this area, and I always remember someone telling me as a teenager, God help anyone who grows up in the Calder Valley and thinks it's normal. But growing up as a teenager in the 80s, there were a couple of events that were sort of the background to me growing up. One was that we'll talk about later, Britain's first alien abduction, which was the policeman Alan Godfrey, and that happened in the 80s. And another was a witch called Barbara Brandolani who tried to buy a disused church on top of in the moors above Hebden Bridge and convert it into a pagan temple. And then Cliff Richard set up this campaign to stop her, and it all got really crazy with this media circus. And the witch claimed to change into a Black Panther and kill sheep on the moors. And so,
Wow.
it was all really surreal, really unusual. And I thought there hasn't been a book that combined all of these unusual local stories so far, and
Hmm.
that's sort of the impetus for it. And once you got a few stories, more and more seem to crop up.
Hmm. And there's a story about the Robin Hood's grave. Is that correct there? And
Mm.
about a vampire. Can you tell us? Is it actually Robin Hood? Is that where his legacy is around that area, around West Yorkshire?
Yeah, a lot of the ballads, because a lot of what we know about Robin Hood comes from ballads that have been passed down through the ages, that tell stories of Robin Hood's adventures. And and although a lot of them, people associate Robin Hood with Nottingham and Sherwood Forest, a
Hmm.
lot of the ballads actually place Robin in Yorkshire. And a couple of the ballads that were, I think, from the 15th century say that describe Robin Hood's death, and place it as occurring at a place called Kirklees Priory, which is in West Yorkshire near Brighouse. So there is
Okay.
a strong connection with Robin Hood and West Yorkshire. I mean, you could probably see that in England there's loads of places that have Robin Hood connected with them, um, but it seems particularly true of this part of West Yorkshire. And it may be because of a couple of ballads place Robin Hood's death clearly in this area.
Okay. And it's there's the vampires that is associated with the area as well. I mean, it's
Yeah,
with that
I mean, if
spot.
yeah, I mean, if you think of the story of the ballads about the death of Robin Hood sort of set the scene. And in these ballads, Robin Hood is an aging outlaw. And so he and Little John set off to Kirklees Priory, where Robin's cousin is the prioress there, and they go for a health treatment. They go for Robin Hood to be bled. But as they're walking towards there, they meet an old woman who's maybe a witch, and she appears to be cursing them, or is she lamenting them? Because there's bits of the manuscript missing, so it's not exactly clear what happens. But Robin Hood and Little John go to the priory, and he's treated in the gatehouse there, where the wicked prioress and her lover, the splendidly named Red Roger of Doncaster, they
Oh,
open one of
right.
Robin Hood's archeries to bleed him to death. So, in effect, they murder Robin Hood. But before he
Right.
dies, he's got enough strength to stick a sword through Red Roger of Doncaster and then fire his final arrow through the window of the gatehouse. And he tells Little John to bury him where the arrow falls. And
Okay.
that's what the ballads say. But um, there is a grave there that is reputed to be the grave of Robin Hood. There's a vague, barely legible inscription on it, and later on it was surrounded by iron railings. Now, the priory
Hmm.
was demolished sometime after the time of Henry VIII. But the gatehouse where Robin was treated is still standing today, though it's on private land. So there
Hmm.
is a grave there. Many people think it's a Victorian folly, but superstitions arose that if you got a bit of the grave, it would cure toothache and all that kind of thing. So yeah, there is a connection between Robin Hood and Kirklees Priory, but it's not clear whether anyone is actually buried under the grave or whether it is a Victorian folly.
Oh, right. That's very interesting there. You
But
also
sorry,
took, yeah, go.
yeah, sorry, you asked me about a vampire, and I got
Yeah, yeah.
distracted
So, yeah.
by the
So
ballad.
go ahead. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The vampire, obviously. Yeah. Is it around there?
Well, yeah, there was. You'd think there'd be a lot of ghostly legends connected with this place, but there don't seem to be until the early 20th century, and then you start to get a few sort of romantic stories of children saying, "Oh, they heard Robin Hood calling for Marion from their bedroom window one night." In the early 60s, you get a couple of more scary ghost stories with a kind of evil prioress in them. But the vampire story seems to emerge much later in the 90s. And that happened when um, the Yorkshire Robin Hood Society was set up to try and promote the Robin Hood's grave and get it open to the public. And this
Hmm.
organisation became involved with somebody called Sean Lancashire. He called himself then Lord Sean Lancaster. Sorry, Sean Manchester, but now he calls
Okay.
himself Bishop Sean Manchester. And he became known as Britain's foremost vampire slayer. He's written a book called The Vampire Slayer's Handbook. He was very prominent in the case of the Highgate vampire in London, if you've heard about that. So
Hmm.
he was involved in that. He met um, the person who set up the Yorkshire Robin Hood Society, whose name was Barbara Green, and she invited him to be the patron
Right.
of the Yorkshire Robin Hood Society. And it was talking to him or communicating with him about vampires that put in Barbara Green's mind that there may be something vampiric about um, Robin Hood's grave, because of course Robin Hood was killed by having his blood drained out of him by this evil prioress. Um,
Hmm.
And so that's how it started. Bishop Manchester came up to um, Robin Hood's grave, which is near Brickhouse, as I said, and carried out some kind of clandestine investigation there and blessing. It's on private land, so you would have to climb over a wall and fight your way through woods and thickets and brambles to get to the grave. And they placed garlic around the grave, and he heard this horrible scream. Did Bishop Manchester, and
Mm.
it turned out to be from one of his researchers who was with him, and he said that he'd seen some horrible prioress type apparition, a red-eyed wraith, appear before him. And so
Wow.
then they escaped. I mean, there's been some doubt as to whether he actually went up and visited the grave, because finding it in the darkness in a wood is going to be pretty hard. Barbara
Yes.
Green had a similar experience that she described, where um, she was visiting the grave at night clandestinely
Mm.
with some people on the way home from the pub. Um, some of these were drunk and stoned, and one of them, whose name was Spaceman, was off his head on lighter fuel. But anyway, they went to the graveyard at night, and when Barbara was alone there, she said she had this vision of her ex lover who suddenly transformed into this horrible figure who was Red Roger of Doncaster. In
Right.
some of her accounts, she describes it as being the evil prioress who had this kind of vampiric appearance. But, she says she was coming off medication at the time, and that might have had something to do with it. And her accounts are rather fluid, let's say. And as everybody's accounts of events concerning the Kirklees vampire, as it's called, the vampire that supposedly haunts Robin Hood's grave, the accounts are very fluid. And what we didn't really touch on is that Sean Manchester, Bishop Sean Manchester, who was involved with the Highgate vampire in London in the 60s and 70s, he has an arch rival called David Farrant, another occultist who is involved in this kind of investigation into the Highgate vampire. And this set off
Mm.
this decades long feud between them. And
Right.
suddenly, the Yorkshire Robin Hood Society got swept up in this feud, with people forming alliances and then breaking them and going over to the other side. And it just became utterly crazy. They filled half of the internet with insults for one another. You can probably still
Wow.
find them chat forums now.
Oh wow. And, it's is the you talk also in the book you have a tale about a 16th century ghost hunting priest. Can you enlighten us about what who this person is?
Yeah, his name was Crabtree, Henry Crabtree, sometimes known as Merlinus rusticus, the rustic Merlin. So he's a really
Hmm.
interesting character. He was the Anglican curate for St Mary's Church in Todmorden, and this is in the mid 17th century. So as well as his duties with the church, he also treated the local population for various physical ailments. But he was also an astrologer, so he'd sort of make notes in the various registers in the church about people's star signs and things, which was quite unusual at the time. But he had a
Right.
reputation of being a necromancer, and the
All right.
servants claimed they could
Hmm.
hear all kinds of strange and horrible sounds coming from his room at night. And one story goes that while he was delivering a sermon,
Hmm.
an amateur occultist broke into his house and tried to do some magic with his magic circles or one of his magic books. And
Right.
suddenly everything went crazy. He unleashed a demon that started smashing everything, and so it was a bit like the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And
Right.
Merlin and Crabtree was delivering a sermon in the church, and he saw a black mouse run across his Bible, and he knew this was a sign. So he pretended to be ill and dashed home, found this chaos going on, and he
Hmm.
threw a load of salt over the floor and ordered the demon to count the grains. And while the demon was distracted, he did whatever magic spells it was needed to sort of get the demon under control. I mean, this is a common
Hmm.
folk story, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and it's attached to a
Hmm.
lot of figures throughout UK. So I'm not surprised that it's been attached to Crabtree. So that was one. There's
Hmm.
another one that he there was a ghost of a priest that dressed in black that haunted the place where he lived, which was Stansfield Hall. And this was a priest who'd supposedly died 50 years ago and would come out all dressed in black and scaring the servants and everything. So
Hmm.
he Crabtree managed to um, place some kind of spell on the ghost or the spirit so that it was confined under a yew tree and was only allowed out occasionally to have a look at the moon. Yeah, so those were his ghost busting adventures. He also had a bit of an adventure trying to trying to cure someone who was demonically possessed. He was known as the Surrey demoniac,
Right.
and that's actually the subject of the book that I'm working on, a history of demonic possession in Lancashire. So that was
Cool.
his last case, and he basically he gave up.
Okay. All right. If you're there, Paul, I know. Sorry, you probably can't hear me, Paul. Probably if you just go in again, it might be able to get you back up on the screen as well. It just went away again. Obviously, there's a lot of weather problems hampering not just on our side, but also on in England as well, Northern England with Storm Amy there. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Kathy from Pathways. How are you doing, Kathy? Hope you're keeping well. Would you see Paul there? Okay. Can you see me, Paul?
And yes, seem to have disappeared
Okay.
again.
I know. Yes. It seems. I don't know. It's I don't know. It's probably the weather. It's the weather's been so bad there. But you're on about actually the book that you are currently on about the demonic in Lancashire. Is it? Oh, there we are. We got
There
you
I
there.
am.
We can see you there.
Hey, sorry, what were
Yeah.
you saying?
So we're talking about what you were searching for your new book, the I think it's Demons at Lancashire. Is it
Yeah,
Lancaster?
Lancashire was a hotbed of demonic possession throughout the 17th century, and it sort of reflected all the political and religious disagreements at the time, the turmoil at the time, and so yeah, that just plays a walk-on part in Weird Calderdale, and that was in effect Henry Crabtree's last major, what we might call paranormal adventure. I mean,
Hmm.
if you were treated, but I should say that he wrote a fairly well-known almanac called Merlinus Rusticus, and that
Hmm.
sort of had this um, geopolitical prophecy, none of which came true. But also, he sort of mixed it with health advice for different months, and most of his health advice was very messy. It involved
Hmm.
purging, vomiting, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. And since the book, I know the book was released with Calderdale in 2003, has there been any in the last 20, God, the years are flying, but has there been anything in the last 20 odd years that you would have loved to put in that book?
Well,
What's happened?
yeah, I mean, I updated Weird Calderdale in 2021, so I rewrote it, doubled it in effect, and so it wasn't the case that there was a lot of new stuff had happened. I think what was the case is that um,
I'm sorry, that's Kathy. So,
thank you. What was the case is that um, a lot more information about the stories that were in there were available. So I expanded on everything that was there. Um, Searchable databases in newspapers, newspaper archives as well. That made a huge difference. So
hmm,
yeah, so I certainly added a lot to it. A lot more was found out. Um, in terms of big weird stuff happening in the last 20 years, I haven't had added much. It's more an account of weird history rather
hmm,
than contemporary events.
yes. And is it still available to people? Can still buy it? Is it, or is it
Oh
still
yes,
available?
it is still available. Um, there's my copy, but yeah, it's still available. Um, as I said, it was updated, doubled in size, rewritten, and so it's 20 chapters, quite a lot on Todmorden UFOs because Todmorden was the UFO center of of the UK for a while. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, you can find it online easily, or in bookshops if you're in the West Yorkshire area.
Perfect. Yeah. So it's very fascinating there, and it's a place that I would love to go to. Is Calderdale there? It's they're not just for the Tetley tea and all that kind of stuff. I don't know they do Tetley tea. No, that's beer, isn't it? No, it's no tea. Tetley tea. No PG
There
tips.
is
No,
Tetley
I don't.
tea. I'm sure
Yeah,
there is.
sorry, I forgot about that. But yeah, so we're going to move on to Alan Godfrey's alien encounter in a second there. But also, we're going to pick out a couple of winners there to go into our Halloween mega draw. And here we go. So we can't pick Jennifer, that's my wife. We'll pick somebody else. That's Kathy. Kathy, you're up. Kathy. And we're also going to pick Jonathan. Jonathan, you're up as well there. So stay tuned. We're going to need some numbers off you after the next segment there. So that'll be for the Halloween mega draw. Well done to Jonathan and Kathy there. Um, so, Paul, we're going to talk about Alan Godfrey's alien encounter. First of all, who is Alan Godfrey?
Yeah, so Alan Godfrey is Todmorden policeman, but or he was. He's retired now, but he's probably best known as, I don't know. You could say maybe Britain's foremost UFO abductee, or well, I guess that is how he's known.
Hmm.
He's generally seen as Britain's first alien abduction case.
Hmm. And what happened? Like, so I got a few dates there. So what happened in October the 23rd, 1977? He was assaulted whilst called out to a alleged was it assault on somebody.
I think so. Yeah, from what I remember, he was badly injured in the assault. Um,
Hmm.
I, although I don't know how, I'm not sure if this was. I think that was something that happened in the line of duty. I don't know if that
Hmm.
was. I don't think that was connected to any of his later adventures.
Hmm. But did he lose a testicle in that
I think he
assault? Was
did.
it?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And was it a case that he was made infertile? Physician said he was infertile, supposedly.
Right. Okay. I don't, yeah. Maybe I don't know about that. I've read. I certainly read his autobiography. I don't remember that bit.
Okay.
But yeah, he certainly lost a testicle in an attack in the line of duty.
Hmm. And like as it was a few months, I think it was a few years afterwards. I think going back to 1980, there was the body of Sigmund Adamski was found. I think it was in a coal yard. It was on top of a coal. Was it? Can you tell us a bit about what happened there?
Yeah.
If you know.
So Zygmunt Adamski, he was a Polish miner, and he was due to give away his goddaughter in uh, on a wedding day, and the day before this, this was the 6th of June, 1980. He went out to buy some
Hmm.
groceries, and he was never seen alive again, as far as we know. And he eventually, he lived near Wakefield, but he turned up dead on top of a pile of coal in Todmorden train station
Okay.
5 days later. So
Hmm.
when he was found, his shirt was missing. He was just had his vest and jacket on. His jacket looked like it was buttoned up wrong. He seemed to be fairly clean shaven. He had some strange burn marks or corrosion type things on his skin, and they looked like they'd been covered with some kind of ointment. Um,
Right.
so it was, a strange death. No one could understand why he was in Todmorden. He had no connection with Todmorden. It's a town 40 miles away from where he lived, and so people started putting together all these kinds of, and it's still unsolved, by the way. It's an unsolved mystery. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, he was. There was an autopsy. The coroner, I think it was James Turnbull, said it was one of the biggest mysteries of his life.
Mm.
and the body was shipped back to Poland. Some might say suspiciously fast to be
Yes.
buried there.
Yeah, because it's probably go on to that. So obviously it was Paul Godfrey found the body. That's correct, isn't it? Would that be correct?
Yeah, well, and yeah, he was the one of the first officers on the scene. Too, himself and another officer were one of the first on the scene. It was somebody who worked in the coal yard found the body, and
Mm.
then Alan Godfrey and a colleague were the first responders, I suppose. Although the medical staff had been there before as well, so. But he was one of the first people to find it, and also, according to his autobiography, conducted some investigations into what had happened to him. But he
Mm.
says he was told in no uncertain terms to back off and to let it lie.
Right.
The coroner's verdict was that Adamski died because of his heart and lung conditions, which,
Mm.
he did have heart and lung conditions, though he was reasonably young. I think he was about 56 or something like that.
Yes. And obviously, though, I think it was a few months afterwards. Then it was Paul Godfrey was called out. Was it to some sort of case of cows appearing and disappearing? Is that the truth?
That's what happened, and that's sort of how the Adamski case got
Mm.
connected with aliens. There was a headline in the Sunday Mirror um, that said something like "Amazing UFO Death Mystery," and it claimed that Alan Godfrey had seen some UFOs 2 hours or something before they'd found the body, which obviously wasn't true. His alien encounter was several months after finding the body. So that's sort of what seemed to give the case the sort of connection with aliens. And
Mm.
people would argue that he was lying face up on a pile of coal as if he'd been dropped there from above. Um,
True.
there was a mysterious ointment on them that tests couldn't
Mm.
reveal what it was. Um, some people pointed out that he was called Adamski, and Adamski, if you're a UFO buff, you'll know that might make you think of George Adamski, who was an early contactee in the 1950s. The contactees were the precursors of people who would be abducted, except the
Mm.
contactees would be walking in the desert and they'd bump into an alien, and the alien would say, "Oh, hi, I'm from Venus. Come aboard my ship, and I'll take you on a tour." So he was one of these. That was George Adamski. He was one of these kind of figures. So the
Mm.
coincidence of the name, I think, all that came together, and it sort of gave us this amazing UFO death mystery. But it's not. But there are other theories as to what happened to Adamski as well, which I don't know if you want to discuss those or you want to go
Yeah. Yeah.
straight
I
into
got.
Alan Godfrey's
I
adventures.
probably I've just got to go on to that night. Was it of the night that he saw with the cows that he saw an alien a UFO spacecraft, wasn't it, on the road? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's right. It was in the early hours of the morning, and this is 1980. This is November 1980. So he was on the
Mm.
night shift, and he'd been sent out to try and find a herd of escaped cows who'd been seen walking around a housing estate, and he
Mm.
didn't have any success. And as he was driving back, he saw this huge diamond-shaped object floating, hovering over the road, over Burnley Road, and it seemed to be rotating. It seemed to have what looked like windows round it. And he stopped there. He seemed to hear a voice, he said, in his head saying, "You shouldn't be seeing this." And then suddenly, he was 100 yards down the road, moving very slowly, and the
Mm.
craft had gone. So, he went back to get a colleague, and they both, looked at the ground. They saw what they thought were strange swirly
Mm.
marks on the ground or dry patches where the rain
Mm.
hadn't touched. And he had a hole in his boot
Mm.
that hadn't
All
been there
right.
before. And um, he noticed he had some missing time. The missing time
Mm.
wasn't that dramatic. It was 15 minutes. Um,
Mm.
but strangely, what they did after he went and got a colleague is they climbed over a wall into a locked park to look for witnesses. And
Right.
as they were walking through the park in the dark, they came across the cows. Now, according to Alan
Wow.
Godfrey, he says the cows had no way of getting into the park. Um,
Right.
they would have had to cross a river and a road. Um,
Hmm.
um, I've spoken to local farmers, and they said cows can surprise you in what they can do. They move
Hmm.
along in the dark, unseen, really quiet, because they're prey.
Hmm.
And they're used to
Hmm.
standing stock still, and they
Yes.
would look like a bush or something in the darkness. But anyway, they
Yes.
climbed over. Then they found the cows, so at least it was that. Alan maintains that the UFOs must have had something to do with the cows. Um,
Hmm.
However, you can imagine what kind of mess a herd of cows would make on your nice shiny flying saucer.
That's the thing. Yeah. What mess could they create? Obviously, if they see something a bit surprising there, but yes, it's so yeah. There was a gap of 20 minutes there, isn't it? And then he had. I think the story was. Did the story get? He had to report it, didn't he, to the
He
governor?
did.
And that was true.
Yeah, we
Hmm.
should say about the 20 minute gap. Alan didn't notice this. It was a UFO researcher who
Hmm.
sort of um, went through the details of the day, and they managed to squeeze out this missing 20 minutes. And yeah, so he reported it to his superior. Now, his superior said that lights in the sky on the same day, on the same evening. This later turned out not to be true. It was a few days before, but some other officers had seen
Hmm.
some strange lights in the sky. A local caretaker had seen some strange lights in the sky as well at the same time. So all that looked like it was sort of giving some credence to Alan Godfrey's story. Um, Obviously, if you pull at these threads, sometimes they come apart. And the thing
Hmm.
with Alan Godfrey's story is there are three main sources. You've got the earliest one written by Jenny Randalls for Flying Saucer Review Journal. That was very
Hmm.
soon afterwards. A couple of years later, you got Jenny Randall's book, The Pennine UFO Mystery, which gives
Right.
more details, much really hard to find nowadays. And then uh, Alan Godfrey wrote his own autobiography a few years ago. It's called Who or What Were They? Plus, you've got
Hmm.
the talks that Godfrey gives in UFO conferences and so on. So those are the sources. And when you look at how they describe these witnesses, for example, the caretaker, they vary quite a lot.
Hmm.
And you can see, in one account, the caretaker saw a strange light sort of move across the sky. This is very much at the time when you get a November meteor shower. But
Yes.
later, the accounts describe the caretaker's UFO as zigzagging all over the sky or being a different color. So when you pull at the threads, it starts to unravel a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah, it's and I've got to touch in more. I've got to probably go and dive really into this there, Paul. There, and go and scrutinise it a bit there about this. But first, but lastly, there was something about that. Um, did he have the go into deep hypnosis, and did he recover what happened in those 20 minutes?
Yeah.
And the story about his wife and able to be fertile again.
Yes. So he underwent hypnosis sometime after, several months after. He was hypnotized by, in all the accounts that you'll find, including his own, they'll tell you he was hypnotized by two hypnotists from Manchester. One was Dr. Blair, well respected
Hmm.
hypnotist who I think he was retired. He seemed not to be very interested in the whole affair, and it's quite clear to me that Dr. Blair didn't believe a word of it. The second hypnotist was someone called Dr. Jaffe, who was found guilty of some kind of medical malpractice. He was a bit of a scoundrel, so we can't really
Right.
take his word for anything. But under these under hypnosis, Alan described how he was zapped up into the UFO, and he described the inside of it as being round but with corners. And on the spaceship, he there was an alien called Joseph, and this alien was very biblical. He had a long white beard, he had a cloak and a skull cap. Strangely enough, there was also a big black dog. And, black dogs are important in folklore. So there was a big black dog there, which was really strange. There were
Right.
some little insect like robots. In some of his later talks, Alan seemed to be trying to change the story a bit so that the robots were greys. But there were these robots who came and put these bracelets on him and plugged him into something, and there was a bright flashing light, and he came to. Well, that was his story under hypnosis. Now, what he didn't say, and what none of the
Mm,
other accounts say, is that there was actually a third hypnotist,
mm,
and he was probably the most one of the most preeminent hypnotists in the UK. So
mm.
he was an academic as well. So he was I can't remember where he's professor of. It was called Hamilton Bertie Gibson, and
Okay.
so he was what I've called the third hypnotist, the bit that's been airbrushed from this strange history. Now, when he hypnotized Alan Godfrey, he was pretty clear that Godfrey wasn't under hypnosis and that he was faking it, and that he was
Mm,
behaving in a way that someone who'd seen hypnosis in movies would behave. And
yes.
he accused. I should also say in this account, I don't know whether the hypnotist made this up to add a bit of extra colour to the story. But in this account, Alan also saw a giant spotted jellyfish on the UFO. But anyway, at the end of the session, the hypnotist suggested that Alan might be suffering from narcolepsy,
Mm,
which means falling asleep at inappropriate times. It can often
mm,
sometimes be accompanied by things like sleep paralysis, where people have these horrible
mm.
hallucinations, waking
Yes.
hallucinations, waking nightmares, if you like.
Yes.
And he offered that as a possible explanation. And it should be
Mm,
said, something that Alan also missed out of his autobiography was he has quite a long history of strange um, paranormal type experiences, all
mm.
involving dogs. So that's
Right.
quite a strange thing. These are
Yes.
described in my book. They're also described in Jenny Randall's book, The Pennine UFO Mystery, if you can get it.
Right.
Totally omitted from his own biography. In one of these, he was driving in 1965. He was driving his brother's van containing a band's musical equipment home from a gig with his girlfriend when a woman and a dog stepped in front of him, and he slammed on the brakes. Um, Got out, and there was no sign of them. And
Right.
in another case, he took his brother's dog for a walk in the park, and then eventually the dog returned without him, and so his brother went looking for him and found him, sort of talking to a bush. And Godfrey said he'd been
Right.
there talking to a mate, and that mate was someone who died several years ago. So
Okay.
he's had a history of these sort of paranormal, would we say, hallucinogenic experiences. So
Mm.
these, I think these should be part of the story.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to a few questions because people
Yeah.
are finding this interesting, and then we're going to dive in and more to about your thoughts there about what actually happened and about Sigmund Adamski there. Kathy says interesting stories. Yeah, this is a very interesting case there. Um, TJ, hi TJ. I hope you're doing well in the fantasy football league. TJ's in the same league as me. He says really interesting tonight. Great being able to catch the show with subtitles as doing a live radio show. Yeah, TJ's a DJ as well. So he's actually on live today, live tonight now at this present moment there, and he's watching the show secretly. There, great there. Well done there, TJ. Yeah, Jonathan mentions the Hellhounds there. So I suppose this is what maybe kind of would probably link with what Alan Godfrey was envisaged or saw around him there. Um, would he have been asleep then on that night when he saw the alien, the UFO?
That's what I know. It's a prosaic explanation, but that's what I think happened. Is that he was on night shifts. So he
Mm,
was suffering from exhaustion. He'd been looking for cows all
mm,
night, and he fell asleep at the wheel. His muscles relaxed, the car slowed down. He had this
mm,
vivid hallucination um, of this UFO. Um, he said that he drew it while he was looking at it. I think what actually happened is that he drew it from memory afterwards. Um,
mm,
but of course, you can't really, he couldn't really say to his superiors that he fell asleep at the wheel, or, or anything like that.
mm.
Um,
No.
that's what I think happened. That there was something in Todmorden called the Futuro House. I don't know if anyone remembers these. There were several of them throughout the country, throughout Europe, in fact. And it's like a demonstration house, and it looked like a
Right.
stereotypical flying saucer on legs, with windows around it. And some people have said that that might have, inspired his vision, his hallucination, his dream, or whatever it was. So, that's
Right.
quite possible.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, we go back to Sigmund Damsky. Um, I know this might be a bit personal question itself. There would there be? It was said to be made fertile again, maybe after this alien abduction. There
Hmm.
is there a possibility that there was some sort of? I'll probably be put off air now, but there was some sort of underlining kind of like cover up for that instance with Adamski's murder there, which probably you could say no had um, Alan Godfrey had an influence on.
Yeah, I think there are two, because Alan Godfrey did say that he was hounded out of the police. Basically, he accused them of
Mm,
planting drugs in his locker and everything, and um,
mm,
so I think there are two possible things that might have pushed him that way. One was that Alan Godfrey received a letter from somebody purporting to be a Russian physicist. This was, of course, at the height of the Cold War, and
mm,
they were asking him about his experiences, and they were also asking questions about the Rendlesham military base. If you know, there was a famous UFO encounter there.
mm,
So I wonder if that Cold War thing might have influenced the police, if they thought um,
mm,
the Soviets were trying to get information from him
mm,
about military bases.
mm,
So certainly when I was writing the book, I can't remember the Russian professor's name now, but um, I found every Russian physicist who had that name and sent them an email. This is many years ago, so asking about UFOs in Todmorden and if they were the one who'd sent the letter. So because there were a lot of physicists who had this name, so I just like the idea of one day all these Russian physicists with the same name woke up getting this email about UFOs in Todmorden. I sent it
mm.
in Russian. But I didn't get a reply from any of them, unfortunately. So that's
Yeah,
one possibility why
mm,
the police were sensitive about this case. The other is that um, Zygmunt Adamski seemed to have been caught up in some kind of family feud.
mm,
And it's not clear exactly what was going on, but I spoke to his goddaughter, who's called Stephanie Krischuk, and so he was due to give her away on her wedding
mm.
day just before he
Wow.
disappeared.
Mm,
And in the family home, in Adamski's family home, um, they had a f- they had it's quite a complex setup, but they had a relative's wife living with them who was estranged from her husband. Now,
okay.
the husband was refusing to take part in the wedding unless he could be part of it, and so it ended up with Adamski having to give away Stephanie instead of her father. So
Mm,
there's a question of whether that had something to do with it. It
mm,
seems pretty clear that um, Adamski was probably lured somewhere and then held against his will.
mm.
Kidnapping someone in broad daylight. Kidnapping
Yes.
someone is really hard.
Yeah.
Not that I know, but and kidnapping someone at any time, especially in broad daylight, is going to be hard. Keeping them,
Mm,
for 5 days is also going to be really hard. But could
mm,
he have been lured somewhere, kept there? Something to do with the family feud that was going on about the estranged couple.
mm,
It's been suggested that maybe he tried to escape because he was being held in a garden shed. He tried to escape, spilled some corrosive liquid on him. These were treated, but then he died from his heart and lung condition, and so somehow they had to get rid of the body. Now, there seems to
mm,
be and I hope I'm not going to get a knock at the door for saying this, but I've heard from how can I say, journalists who were close to this case,
Mm.
that there's some suspicion that one of the people involved in the death of Adamski, um, or at least in the cover-up, is connected with the police, and that has led to the kind of
Mm.
the police reticence about this. Now, when I first wrote this way back in 2000, I wrote to the editor of UFO magazine,
Mm.
because it's called Graham Birdsall, and
Right.
his brother had conducted an investigation into this. So I just, wrote to him asking about this, and he sent me Adamski's mortuary photo, a photo of Adamski, on the mortuary, which clearly showed coal
Mm.
marks on his face, which demonstrated that he'd been lying face down, and
Oh,
the medic
yes.
had turned him over rather than being landing face up. Um,
Mm.
so I decided not to include it in the book, because it seemed, a little bit too morbid. But um, it seems that when people have tried to investigate this, the police have shut it down immediately. And speculation from people in the know, including some former police officers, has been that, there must have been some kind of police involvement, and that's why they wanted to cover it up, and not allow the case to be reopened.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Hopefully, something will come about that some sort of may reopen there. And I suppose the thing is, but Alan Godfrey is probably used as a pawn in this kind of event. There,
Mm,
he's had but whatever it is, he's had his experience, his encounter there, and then it's suddenly this mysterious death in the train coal yard is linked to him. That
mm.
would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Alan Godfrey has said in his many talks that he thinks the persecution that he allegedly received from the police was because of his investigation into Adamski, rather than
Mm,
for the UFO stuff.
yes.
So that there we have it. I mean, it's a really interesting case, still unsolved, but the solution must be out there.
Yeah, and as Alan's any these children opened up about about the whole thing as well. Like, are they and Alan himself? Have you seen Alan around yourself around the area?
No, I've met him and spoken to him a couple of times, and I've sent him letters, although he hasn't emails, but he hasn't replied to me. And I've asked him a few questions. I've seen him at talks, and
Mm,
he seems, when I asked him about his paranormal experiences as a young man, the pre UFO ones with dogs, he was very uncomfortable and didn't want to answer them. Uh,
mm.
so I also asked him about the third hypnotist in a couple of emails, but I never got an answer.
Yes, it's very interesting topic there, and it's yeah, there's been nothing since there recently there with the family with UFO encounters there or
Not that I know
not.
of. I
No.
mean, maybe there has. If anyone else has heard anything, I'd love to hear it. And I'll put it
Oh,
in the
okay.
volume of Weird Calderdale.
Oh, perfect, perfect. It's a very interesting topic there, and folks, there we go. Move on to the next topic, which is going to be Phantoms of Christmas Past, which is Paul's new book. There, I'm just going to get all Christmassy out in a second there. But first of all, I'm asking Kathy, if you're still there, and Jonathan to pick a number between 1 and 4, a number between 5 and 8, and a number between 9 and 12. So that's a number between 1 and 4, a number between 5 and 8, and a number between 9 and 12. If you're still there, Kathy and Jonathan there. I hope you can still hear me. You can still see me there. We're still recording anyway. Um, so if you're still there, folks. In the meantime, there, we're going to move on to the next subject. So whilst they're doing that, we're going to move on to Phantoms of Christmas Past. Um, so if we've got numbers, no. Oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. Bit of a delay there. Kathy says one, probably 149. I'll go with your first number there. So Kathy. So we're going 1, 8, and 9. Okay, for Kathy, and for Jonathan, we're going with 2, 7, 10. Perfect, perfect, excellent. There. Okay, so we're going to touch on phantasms of Christmas past. Paul, can you tell us, enlighten us first about one of the kind of unusual uh, uh, stories in your book? Well, it's the Hammersmith Ghost of 1803, 1804. Can you divulge on, well, tell us what happened there a little bit?
Yeah. So, yeah, the book's called Phantoms of Christmas Past, Festive Ghost Hunts, Ghost Hoaxes, and Ghost Panics. And that sort of summed up in the case of the Hammersmith Ghost. Yeah, we sort of forget it now, but throughout the 19th century and the early 20th century, putting a sheet over your head and hanging around in a graveyard trying to scare people was a really common activity. It was rife throughout the whole of the country. Um, and it caused a sensation wherever it happened. Sometimes people would just wear a sheet over their head. Sometimes they'd wear a devil mask or use luminous paint and everything and create more imaginative costumes. But sometimes this would lead to sort of huge panics. You might get patrols walking the street trying to catch the ghost and beat them up, or you might get people afraid to go out and that kind of thing. So, in the case of the Hammersmith Ghost, 1803, 1804, Hammersmith now is part of London, but back then in the early 19th century it was semi-rural. It had orchards. It was an agricultural area sort of on one side, and then it had the growing metropolis of London uh, growing into it. Um, so what seemed to start it off was an Irishman called Thomas Flynn attempted to murder his wife and then took his own life, cut his throat and died horribly.
Okay.
Now, when people took their own life, um, they were buried in a crossroads
Hmm.
quite often at the time, sometimes with a stake through their heart. The folklore is
Okay.
it's so the ghost wouldn't return, or if it did return, it wouldn't know which way to go. But um, Flynn was buried under a crossroads, and this caused a outrage in the Irish community that he was treated
Hmm.
so disrespectfully. So this awful case would have been on the minds of a lot of people in Hammersmith at the time. And then as Christmas approached in 1803, you started to get these a few people who were what the press would call playing the ghost, putting a white sheet on their head or a scary costume and scaring
Hmm.
people. And this seemed to spread. So there may have been several people doing this. There were rumors that one woman a pregnant woman had been scared to death by someone pretending to be a ghost. So it led to this huge panic with people walking the streets trying to catch the ghost. It was clear that it was a ghost hoax. It was obviously someone with a
Hmm.
sheet on his head. So um, people were looking for him, and it got to the stage that by the way, these ghost hunts could get really out of hand. People would be drunk on them, especially near Christmas. It was more of like a celebration. Um, so, anyways, these ghost hunts developed. Sometimes the ghost hunters would dress in drag because the victims were mostly women.
Oh, right.
They dress in drag, so you can imagine it would be a bit like a stag party. These young lads, farm labourers, and so on, all dressed as women, getting drunk, walking around the streets like a stag party, trying to find the ghost. It'd be really sort of carnivalesque thing. But one guy took it
Right.
to the extreme. He took a pistol, waited in a dark alley where the ghost had been seen a number of times, and when a figure in white approached him, he challenged him, and when the figure didn't reply, he shot him. And it turns out he'd killed someone called Thomas Millwood, who was a plasterer. And plasterers in that time wore white clothes.
Yes.
And again, this caused a huge outrage.
Hmm.
With thousands of people, coming to the inquest trying to see the body. And then shortly afterwards, a shoemaker called John Graham was was fingered as the culprit, as being the ghost hoaxer because he was caught. He said that his apprentice had been scaring his children with ghost stories, so he decided to get some revenge by putting a sheet over his head and scaring the apprentice while the apprentice was walking home. Now, he said he'd only
Right.
done it once, and that's probably true.
Mm.
All the other ghost hoaxes were by different people, but when these
Mm.
panics erupt, sometimes a scapegoat like that can dissipate the panic. But that was the story
Mm.
of the Halifax, the Hammersmith, uh, the Hammersmith ghost. It was a huge thing, and it sort of really gripped the whole community with this strange sort of hysterical panic and fear of a ghost hoaxer. Because it's not really the case that people believed the ghost was real.
Mm.
Because you imagine you're walking down a street at night in a spooky location and you see
Mm.
someone standing there alone, dressed as
Mm.
a ghost.
Mm.
You know, you're not going to know what his intentions are. It's going to be
True.
scary, it's going to be unnerving, even though you can see plainly that it's not a real ghost. It's some geezer with a sheet over his head.
Yeah. I suppose when you look at it there, where you look at people dressed as a ghost, that would probably might be the equivalent of somebody dressed up as I forget the name of the fella, the Scream Mask.
Mm,
Having that kind of clothing and all that. So we don't know back in those times, seeing a white sheet, somebody in a white sheet at the end of an alleyway, is that had that same sort of frightening aspect to it. Same, I forget
it
now.
would.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and of course, remember, some of them might have daubed themselves with luminous paint. They might be wearing
Hmm.
a devil mask, or I think one of them had a tall, luminous hat. So some of them would have had really inventive costumes, you know,
Hmm.
um, using lamplight and tin foil gives all this kind of glistening. Now, one
Hmm.
of the funniest ones that I forgot to mention with the Hammersmith ghost was that on Christmas Day, 1803, a coach driver was um, driving his coach and horses, and he heard this eerie rattling noise, and he stopped his coach, and he looked out, and there in the field he could see this white figure, and it was making this horrible, scary rattling noise. And as it came closer, he could see that it was covered from head to foot in pig's bladders that were filled with dried peas, and that was what was making
Wow.
the rattling noises. And that was a common child's toy at the time. Imagine getting
Yeah.
that for Christmas, a pig's bladder
Yeah.
with the dried peas inside. But yeah, the costumes could be really inventive.
Yeah. It's very interesting there. So yeah, I suppose I don't know, but probably whether Charles Dickens got his inspiration for. I think it's what's the Motley, is it? Forget the name of the ghost there, Christmas,
Mm.
that appeared on Christmas, and Scrooge. Can you tell us what was the tale about the ghost of Richard III on New Year's Eve, 1921?
Yeah, because the sort of the ghost hoaxes that I looked at, they tended to fall into three different categories where you had the
Mm.
playing the ghost, the sheet over the head type of thing that led to panics and
Mm.
so on. There
Mm.
was also poltergeist jinx where um, people would throw things around the room and pretend it was a poltergeist, and then you get people would descend on the house trying to see the ghost. And
Right.
then there were journalistic japes,
Mm.
journalistic jokes, and I think Richard III falls into this. I mean, um, probably most people are familiar with the end, Richard III's horrible death, where if you're
Mm.
familiar with the Shakespeare play, he's um, just
Right.
before the Battle of Bosworth and
Mm.
the final act in the War of the Roses, and Richard III's there alone. He drinks some wine and he falls asleep, and then the ghosts of all the people he's killed on his way to the crown come and visit him and tell him to despair and die. And
Mm.
anyway, in the battle, he dies, he falls, he loses his horse, and Shakespeare has him say,
Mm.
"A horse, a horse, my kingdom for a horse," and
Beautiful horse. Yeah.
he's bludgeoned to death, and then
Mm.
and all kinds of horrible things happen to him after death, and he's bundled into a unmarked grave, um,
Mm.
which later turned out to be a car park in Leicester,
Yeah.
quite recently. But
The car
um,
park wasn't there beforehand.
no,
So-
no, and then in in the 1920s, there
Mm.
didn't seem to be much ghost lore around this place. It's called Ambion Hill in Leicestershire, where
Mm.
the battle took place. But um, uh, in one January, a local newspaper said that a farmer called Bill Chesterton was walking home from the pub on New Year's Eve with a companion, and
Mm.
they took they went to see a fox den somewhere
Okay.
on Ambion Hill, and as they approached the woods, they saw a kind of green mist, and Bill Chesterton's friend became scared and he ran off. But Bill went closer, and this this weird green mist was surrounding this ghostly figure that was was ugly, looked evil, had a hump, and he was wearing this kind of plum cloak. And the ghost introduced himself as being the ghost of King Richard III. And he said that he came here every New Year's Eve to relive his final battle. But on this occasion, he'd come with a message for mankind. And the message that he had for mankind was to tell the woodsmen who were cutting down the trees on Ambion Hill to stay their hand. Um, and so this was printed in the newspapers. Now, if you
Right.
read this story, you would tell straight away that this was a joke. It was written by the editor as a hoax. It was a bit of fun. You can tell by, that the ghost of King Richard is very cartoonish. He speaks in a
Mm.
kind of cod Shakespearean way.
Mm.
He even introduces the farmer in the article. It says a bluff farmer. It's really there's loads of nods and winks that this is a joke. But when
Yes.
newspapers around the country picked up the story, they just shortened it and took out all the sort of ironic bits and bits that let you know it was a joke. And so um, other newspapers printed it, and people believed it to be a true story. And that sort of created the legend that it had hoaxed, because then people came to Ambion Hill looking for King Richard's ghost, and locals started
Mm.
saying yes, they'd seen the ghost. So it's newspapers often did this, and sometimes if they could get other newspapers to be taken in by it, all the better. The
Mm.
newspaper more or less admitted that it had made up the story, as a bit of Christmas joke, as a Christmas joke, and that was fairly common for newspapers at the time to make up stories of sea monsters and weird goings on.
Yeah, this is interesting because I got to ask you. This probably goes into the other question I'm probably going to ask after the next one. But because I mentioned that people actually thought they saw something around those areas of that something that resembled Richard III. But first of all, do any of these? Do you know of these any hoaxes or ghost panics happening outside of the UK, or do you know of any?
That there are plenty. So some of these, there's a professor in Australia who's recorded a lot of these very similar kind of events in Australia. I certainly know from my some research I did for an article on my blog about an Irish poltergeist who I took the liberty of calling Sweary Mary, because as well as throwing things, she'd swear a lot. It turned out to be one of the servant girl who was throwing things around and then pretending it wasn't her. This was quite common. This was in Clonmel.
Oh yes,
I just
Clonmel.
found that because my mum's from Clonmel, so it was nice to
Cool.
find a kind of ghostly hoax coming from my mum's hometown. So I'm sure they're rife. They haven't been written about very much, um, and I think it might be because people are looking for ghostly mysteries that are sort of unsolved. But um, I just became fascinated with these ghost hoaxes where it was something so simple as a ghost over a sheet over the head, but quite often they'd be connected with local ghost lore, local legends, um, and the way that people would um, it doesn't really happen now, but when people heard that there was
Mm.
a ghost in a nearby town or a nearby house, they'd come and gather around it. And these crowds would get bigger and bigger and bigger. Sometimes
Mm.
there'd be hundreds, and then there'd be thousands, and it would get out of hand. So, and occasionally
Yes.
it would lead to riots. There in Islington in 1899, this guy wrote a letter to the paper saying he saw a ghost on Christmas Day outside the church. And then, so suddenly that night, the hundreds of people gathered after the pubs had closed. And so you can imagine all these people full of Christmas cheer. Let's go and find a ghost. And so there'd be these wild, drunken ghost hunts where people would be
Mm.
chasing each other among the tombs. They'd be
Mm.
shouting and screaming and making ghost noises and jumping out, and the police would lose control. The press called it the vulgar riot, and these kind of things were quite common, where
Right.
it would just get out of hand and become a kind of drunken ghost hunting impromptu party come
Right.
riot.
It's like a social thing, really. There, I
It
suppose.
is, yeah, because
Yeah.
people would gather just to share their stories,
Mm.
their own supernatural experiences or their own theories about what was happening, or share news about what they'd heard, the gossiping. So it was a social event, and especially at Christmas, these things could just whip up into an impromptu party. That the newspapers would look at it with utter disdain. At all these credulous, superstitious people. How could they, in the 19th century, the age of the steam train, believe all this rubbish? But I don't think it's
Mm.
because they were superstitious. They were there because people are fascinated by ghost stories.
Mm.
Some would have been skeptical, some would have been believers, but a lot of them would just have been open-minded, curious. They wanted to get drunk with their mates and scare
Mm.
each other in the graveyard.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. As we're touching about, like going back to Richard III, and that some people saw the Richard III. Do you think people seeing him is in fact accordance with a past reality or scanning of an ethereal region? So that actually are there other psychological, physiological factors to blame so their imprints have been left there by our own consciousness. I say, like as you mentioned about people seeing Richard III, it was mentioned that Richard III there, so people would see Richard III, they would believe it more, but actually that entity is not there. Do you reckon these delusions, because you've written for Skeptic magazine, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you reckon, in your own theories, what a ghost is?
Yeah, I know some people like the sort of stone tape theory or something like that, where
Mm.
the ghost, um, it's not a spirit of a dead person; it's something that's projected or recorded or
Mm.
something like that. Um, I'm not sure. I think in the case of Richard III, um, the the local people who've seen the ghost, we just don't get any details from the press, unfortunately, to be able to make much of a decision. Um,
Mm.
so it could just be local rumor, that
Mm.
that sort of got mixed up. So it's very hard to tell. You know, um, the thing, I've been thinking about ghosts quite a lot recently while writing that book, and the thing that struck me about them is that um, if you look at ghosts from medieval times, they're really weird and not at all like what we see as a ghost now. There's a famous collection of ghost stories collected by a monk in Yorkshire. So you can look them up online. It's called the Byland Abbey Ghost Stories, and this monk, medieval monk, he collected quite a few of them, and they're really strange because these ghosts, the ghosts that he talked about, were very zombie-like. They were
Mm.
the dead body would get up and walk around. It's not like
Okay.
a modern zombie in that it would eat your brains
Mm.
or anything. It would just sort of lumber around, and it would cause you death or illness if it touched you. But it seemed like
Right.
it was just sad and lost, and it might press its face to the window and ruin your dinner. Um,
Yeah.
and usually it would have to be addressed, commanded by a priest, to say who it was and then why he wasn't sleeping in the grave. And in one of these stories, the ghost stroke zombie is a priest who stole some spoons in his life, and he felt guilty about it. So the zombie came back to show where he'd hidden the spoons. So that's a long way of saying, you know, I think that ghosts reflect the culture of our time. So when we get to
Mm.
the spiritualist era and the spirit photography, well, ghosts started being all sort of Art Nouveau and flowy robes and
Mm.
ethereal and transparent instead of
Yes.
physical. Um,
Yes.
uh, Nowadays, ghosts sort of interfere with electronic phenomena and so on. So ghosts
Mm.
seem to sort of reflect the era that they're in, which seems to me to suggest folkloric, psychological, and cultural explanations.
Yeah, it's very fascinating because I'm thinking of this myself. That is what is going to be with the AI, as in not AI, sorry, the virtual world, that we actually come across demons in the virtual world and we actually send ourselves out in the virtual world and combat these demons. We could be all Buffy and Spike in the virtual world and be going like this in our rooms with masks over our head and thinking we're fighting a demon. But there could be a demon there, I don't know. But AI could be bringing that into the future there, or artificial
Yeah, well,
intelligence.
who knows where that's going? Yeah.
True, yeah. Can you tell us where people can get the book uh, there, Paul?
Yeah, so Phantoms of Christmas Past. It's published by Sixth Books, so it's available wherever you get your books from. Wherever you buy books online, you can get it there. You can certainly order it in your local bookshop as well.
It's excellent there. Oh God, and it's what's happening. It's starting to it's starting to snow here. We're getting very festive there. Woo! The first snow of the winter there. Like so.
Storm
And
Amy
what I was
coming
going to
back
say
again.
there, Storm Amy, it's getting really bad now. But can you tell us, enlighten us there about a couple of other, maybe other stuff that may be found in the book that may have been be of some interest with people for people?
Um, yeah, I think one of the more the really interesting ones that that I wrote about for the book was um, the clanking ghost of East Barnet. I mean, the ghost's got a great name, the clanking ghost of
Mm,
East Barnet, and this was another one where you've got a kind of a ghostly legend. Um, and this is of someone called Geoffrey de Mandeville, who was a kind of a robber baron from King Stephen's time. So when did he die? It was 1140s or something like that. 1144, he died. So he was a robber baron. He had this reputation of this fierce warrior, and so around the area of East Barnet in London, you got rumours of his ghost, who you'd recognise by the clanking of his armour. So there was already that kind of legend there. But then in Christmas 1926, a workman was guarding some building materials, and he claimed to have seen this strange apparition in a military cloak, who was complete, just a skeleton, but with a military cloak on. And this was
right.
reported in the newspapers, and it was assumed to be the clanking ghost of East Barnet, um, de Mandeville, Geoffrey de Mandeville. And this led to, huge response from the public, who, came out to the streets to try and catch a glimpse of him over the next few nights. Now, it also led to the council having a debate about whether watchmen should be given extra pay if they're guarding haunted locations, which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah.
Um, the watchman later denied he'd seen anything, so we don't know whether this might have been a bit of a joke. But, anyways, crowds of people came down onto the streets of East Barnet. And then the newspapers, and rumour spread that there was another ghost, a lady ghost called the Grey Lady, who was very beautiful and had these attractive ghostly dimples that attracted the young men from all around the country to come and try and catch a glimpse of her. And she was said to be, the girlfriend of the clanking ghost of East Barnet, who was trying to save his soul. So you got, hundreds of people crowding round the streets.
Mm,
You had um, people trying to investigate. So you'd have your serious investigators with their equipment, and they'd have ghost hunting locations connected by telephone, which was the technology of the time.
mm,
And against those, you had the spiritualists. Societies who would also come up, and there was some kind of tension between them because the psychic investigators were trying to be scientific, but they weren't really getting anything. But the
mm,
spiritualists would always find a ghost, and there was some
mm,
resentment that these London spiritualists were coming here and stealing our ghost. And then on top of that, you had, as we were talking about before, these ghosts would bring hundreds of drunken amateur investigators into the streets, come there for a lark. And the strange thing was that the following year it happened again, and then again. And so every year it
right.
got bigger until there would be, every Christmas, thousands of people on the streets of East Barnet in London, you know, running around, getting drunk, scaring each other, trying to find the ghost. And it got to such a case that the psychic investigators were complaining that rather than people being afraid of ghosts, now the ghost was afraid of people. There were so many people there, lights, that they were afraid the ghost wouldn't show. And this carried on every year from 1926 until at least 1945. It became an annual drunken ghost on the streets of London. So it's a shame that doesn't still happen now, because it sounds great fun.
Oh God, yeah. I'm gonna start one there now, but then it'd probably be a protest or something like. People probably think it'd be a protest I've started up or something like that. Jonathan says, and it's not even Halloween yet. I think that's to do with the snow there. Jonathan, it looks a brilliant book there, Paul. There, Phantoms of Christmas Past there. So that's available. It's available to buy now, and I'm just probably go back to Paul on these details where you can find Paul more about his books and himself there shortly there. But first of all, we are going to do this. I'm just going to show a trailer. This is happening Friday, the 24th of October, and we're going to show the premiere of Redwood, Hide or Shriek, and it's an investigation. We take you on an investigation with Pucker Vogue Paranormal Investigations at Redwood Castle, situated in County Tipperary, not far from Clonmel, Paul there. And yes, so this is going to be a Halloween extravaganza, Friday the 24th of October at 9 p.m, where we're also going to be interviewing some very interesting guests. This is the trailer. If I can get to it, here it goes.
Hide and shriek. The children play, not knowing what stalks the darkened way.
Now that will go off another time.
Whispers crawl through floorboards deep. Something wakes that should still sleep.
Are you hiding from someone?
And one less voice will rise today.
Yeah. So,
oh wow, I've seen that. Go Margaret, Arish.
Thank you so much.
Wow, that is amazing. I got that.
Okay, so that's Redwood, Hide or Shriek. That's coming the 24th of October. Documentary featuring Pucker Vogue Paranormal Investigations. We've got another thing I just got to highlight there, people there, if people are interested. This is a book there that's coming out there, being asked to promote this. Is from Red Line Festival, and they are holding an event with author of Chasing the Dark, Ben Mackell, and Sophie White on Friday the 17th of October at 8:30 p.m. at the Civic Mainspace Theatre in Dublin. Tickets are from €8 to €12. So that's Red Line Festival, if you want to look that up. And that's about the new book, Chasing the Dark, which is very interesting. I think it's Tony Cornell his research into the paranormal. So here we're coming into the competition. And Jonathan and Kathy, good luck with this. Jonathan says his wife picked out the numbers this time, so good luck. You can blame your wife there if they don't come up. So here we go. This is Astral Travel. You have a chance to win up to €40. Kathy, you picked 4, 8, and 9, and Jonathan, you picked 4, 7, and wait, I've got the numbers mixed up. Kathy, you picked 1, 8, and 9, and Jonathan, you picked 2, 7, and 10. Here we go. Good luck. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong one. Oh, my God, it's happening all tonight. That's the wrong video. Okay, here we go. Good luck. So 1, 8, and 9 for Kathy, and 2, 7, and 10 for Jonathan. Here we go. Oh, you won £10. so far, €10 there so far, Kathy. Jonathan. Shame there, Jonathan. Game over right at the start. What a shame there. But Kathy, you're still in there. You picked number 8 now. That can win up to €20 on the second stage. You'll put your name in the Halloween Mega Draw. Also put Paul's name in the Halloween Mega Draw. Here we go, number 8. You put your name into the prize draw, Kathy. Well done. Well done there, Kathy. You've won €10 so far. That can go up to €40. And your name's in the Halloween Mega Draw. Here we go. You picked number 9. Good luck. Let us see what happens here. No, game over. No. What a pity. Well done there, Kathy. Anyway, you got €10. Amazing. €10, but you've also put your name into the Halloween Mega Draw, which would be prize draw will be done on the Halloween Extravaganza 5 on Friday the 24th of October. So Paul, where can people find you there? I know Kathy's put some details there. She says Paul's book is available on W.H. Smith Collective link and Amazon. Is there any more details or any pages like people to check out?
So you can. My blog is at paulweatherhead.com. I've got a blog there that looks at sort of ghosts. Especially interested in things like mass hysteria, mass panics, and that kind of thing, as well as all kinds of weird stuff, weird history, and that kind of thing. I've got a podcast called Monsters, Myths, and Manias. You'll find that wherever you get your podcasts.
It's been enjoyable there, Paul. I'm sorry there for maybe the interference there. I know the weathers and all that has playing havoc both sides all over. Amy's really doing us harm there. And those who are watching, thank you for participating there tonight there. And hello, Irene, as well. You said hello there earlier as well there. Hello to you in California as well. For the next show, we have the next episode is our end of season show with a 3-hour broadcast for the festive season that is Halloween. A night of chat, special guests, interviews, and fun on the GhostÉire channel awaits you. And prizes will be won. Paul, thank you very much for having been on the show. Thank you to all that have commented. Jonathan, Kathy, Irene. Thank you to my wife that's been on as well on the air there. And TJ as well. Hope you're not working too hard there. Very interesting night. A very interesting man is Paul. Great night. What about me, Kathy? Anyway, we won't see you next time. We'll see you in the near distance. Goodbye for now, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You can wave there, Paul. You can wave. I haven't pressed stop yet. Now I will do.